the first to bleed. The sky over Corthan Ridge was a seething orange bruise, the twin suns swallowed by smoke and the stench of burnt metal. Plasma fire arced through the canyon like lightning from angry gods. Screams, both mechanical and organic, echoed in every frequency of horror. Captain Araz of the Kshari High Vanguard crouched behind jagged rock, his 6 limbs twitching with restrained panic. Half his unit was gone. The other half was bleeding into the dirt. He tapped his comm, no response. Jamming field. Classic Trivax ambush. This was supposed to be a joint patrol, a diplomatic exercise with humans. Exchange of strength, the High Matriarchs had called it. What strength was there in this chaos? Suddenly, a blur crashed down beside him. A figure, broad, armored, bleeding. The human. Sergeant Dana Rourke, 4th Terran Shock Division. Her helmet was cracked, one eye swollen shut, plasma burns blooming across her left arm. She was clutching a Kshari soldier, Private Chell, to her chest, shielding him with her own body as she skidded into cover. Got him, she gasped, blood pouring from her flank. That's number 3. Chell whimpered, missing a leg. Araz stared, mandibles frozen. Why would you do that? Rourke wiped her face with a shaking hand and smiled with something terrifying in her teeth. Because he was breathing. Araz didn't respond. Not because he lacked words. Because he couldn't believe what he'd just seen. Araz watched as Rourke tore a strip of her own undersuit, wrapping it around Chell's stump with practiced speed. You should have left him, Araz hissed, trying to sound commanding but failing to mask the disbelief. We are taught from hatching. The wounded are the price of the living. Yeah, Rourke grunted, cinching the tourniquet tight. You said that yesterday. And yet, she waved a shaky hand toward Chell. Here he still is. Behind them, the Trivax pushed harder, energy bolts shattering the cliff face. The air sizzled with static and ozone. Another Kshari soldier, Lieutenant Drogar, crawled into the crevice, trailing green blood. Captain, he choked, they've cut off the rear pass. No way out. Araz clicked. That was it. The directive was clear. If overwhelmed, Kshari forces must detonate their field cores to avoid capture. A clean end. An honorable exit. He reached for the trigger capsule. Rourke's hand shot out, iron gripping his wrist. Don't you dare. This is mercy, Araz said. This is cowardice, she snapped. I'm not leaving anyone. Another explosion rocked the ridge. Chell cried out. Drogar collapsed. And Rourke stood up. Despite everything, wounds, fatigue, death itself, she stood. Araz felt something alien slither down his spine. Fear. Rourke toggled her radio. Echo, 7 to any unit in range. We need airlift or heavy suppression now. I've got wounded, coordinates transmitting. The static laughed at her. Araz watched her move like a tank on 2 legs, dragging Drogar back under the overhang while shielding Chell with her own armor. He noticed how she moved toward danger, not away from it. He couldn't understand it. Why do you keep risking yourself? He asked. Her eye met his, fury in it. Because I started this patrol. That makes these soldiers my responsibility. That is not logic. It is humanity, she cut in. A plasma round struck inches from her head, showering sparks. She didn't flinch. And then came the worst of it. Over the ridge, in the full open, lay Private Jorik, barely visible, bleeding and motionless, half his body draped over a rock. One of hers. And without hesitation, Rourke vaulted the cover and ran. Sergeant, N.O. Araz shouted. But she didn't stop. She was out in the open. And the Trivax saw her. Laser fire stitched across the ridge like angry scribbles. Rourke weaved through them, fast despite her injuries. Her hand clamped Jorik's collar, hauling him with brute strength back toward the cliffs. A bolt struck her leg. She stumbled. Another burned across her shoulder, sending her helmet flying. Still she moved. Kshari eyes watched in paralyzed awe as she reached the edge of cover and hurled Jorik into Araz's waiting arms. He caught the limp form just as another bolt tore into Rourke's side. She crumpled. No, Araz shouted, dragging her back with both upper limbs. He slapped a med patch on her chest, fingers shaking. I got him, she mumbled, her blood mixing with dust. Told you. No one gets left. Araz wanted to argue, wanted to scream at her for her insanity. But he didn't, because even as the Trivax pressed closer, reinforcements arrived. Terran gunships howled overhead, and the ridge turned red with flame. The Trivax line broke. But Rourke wasn't moving anymore. Medical tents bloomed like pale mushrooms in the post-battle field. The scent of antiseptics battled with scorched rock. Rourke was alive. Barely. She lay on a recovery slab, chest bound in synth weave, IVs pumping nanites through her ravaged body. Her face, bruised and burned, twitched with half-conscious dreams. Araz stood over her, silent. In the days following the battle, rumors had spread like wildfire through both armies. The humans had saved over a dozen wounded Kshari, refused to leave them, even under fire. Field medics had charged into crossfire to rescue soldiers they'd never met. One human private had died, shielding a Kshari child civilian from shrapnel. It made no sense. Not in Kshari doctrine. Araz found himself at odds with everything he'd ever believed. Drogar approached, his chest still wrapped from his wounds. "They're not like us, Captain. They are broken. Defective." "No," Araz whispered. "There's something else." Drogar tilted his head. "What then?" But Araz didn't answer. He simply stared at the woman who'd bled for his soldiers. By the 6th day, Rourke was conscious again. Her voice was raw, her eyes tired, but the fire had not left her. Araz sat beside her, talons folded. He'd dismissed the medics. This conversation was private. "I need to understand," he said. "Why?" Rourke gave him a look, tired, amused. "Didn't we already go over this?" "Not enough." She exhaled slowly. "All right, here's the truth." She winced as she sat up. "In your doctrine, survival is honor. Leave the dying. Save the strong." "Yes. We're the opposite," she said. "We don't worship survival. We worship loyalty. Brotherhood. We don't measure strength by how far we get." She leaned forward, voice like gravel and thunder. "We measure it by how many we bring back alive." Araz felt the words hit like artillery. "That is not strength," he said quietly. "It is terrifying." She gave a grim smile. "Exactly." There was silence. Then Araz asked, softly, "Why do you call yourself the first to bleed?" Rourke looked at him, gaze sharp and knowing. "Because if I'm the first to bleed." She paused. "It's my job to make damn sure I'm not the last." The next mission came a week later. Another joint patrol. This time, the Kshari High Vanguard didn't hesitate to follow their human counterparts into the field. But something had changed. Araz led from the front, not with the cold certainty of sacrifice, but with a new resolve. When a Kshari soldier stumbled under fire, Araz picked them up. When a human trooper was wounded, Drogar shielded them. Rourke, limping but armored once more, watched it unfold from the ridge. "You see that?" a corporal said beside her. "Yeah," she murmured. "They're starting to get it." The Trivax attacked again, and this time, they were repelled not by superior weapons or numbers, but by a wall of soldiers who refused to abandon the fallen. Even the Kshari now fought with reckless, horrifying loyalty. The Trivax fled, and as the smoke cleared, Rourke holstered her rifle and looked at the field of wounded being carried, not left. It wasn't humanity the Kshari feared anymore. It was what they might become if they started believing like humans. And in that moment, the galaxy grew a little more dangerous. End of story.